It was an ordinary day in Washington, D.C., until a car exploded in the middle of the street, shattering the calm with deadly force. Inside that vehicle were a former ambassador and his young assistant, both of whom lost their lives in the blast. As federal investigators from the FBI began piecing together the incident, they quickly realized that this wasn't just an isolated act of violence. The people behind the attack weren't done, and soon the agents and even their families found themselves targeted. This was the start of a dangerous manhunt, a race against time to stop a ruthless mastermind who had meticulously planned the assassination of a diplomat. Back in the 1970s, politically driven kidnappings and killings had become increasingly common across South America. And when that violence began spilling over into American territory, the FBI had no choice but to get involved. "I'm Jim Carlstrom," one voice begins, former head of the FBI's New York office. The case, he explains, led his team into a tangled web of diplomats, spies, and assassins. Untangling it would mean working with undercover sources and even ex-criminals. On September 18, 1976, a man set his plan in motion, a deadly plot of revenge targeting one of his government's harshest critics. That critic was Orlando Letelier, a former Chilean ambassador living in exile in the United States. Letelier had been a passionate socialist who wasn't afraid to call out the brutal military regime of Augusto Pinochet, the dictator who seized power in Chile 3 years earlier through a violent coup. Letelier's public condemnation of human rights abuses in his home country made him a threat to that regime. So much so, in fact, that Chile stripped him of his citizenship. One European nation had even cut financial ties with Chile due to Letelier's testimony. Just past midnight on September 19th, the assassin crept under Letelier's car and attached a remote-control bomb beneath the driver's seat. The plan was simple: detonate the device with a radio signal and silence Letelier forever. 2 days later, Letelier drove to work, accompanied by his 25-year-old assistant, Ronnie Moffett, who sat beside him in the front seat. Her husband, Mike Moffett, rode in the back. They arrived near the Chilean embassy, where nearby officers were stationed for security reasons. Suddenly, the car exploded. Chaos erupted. Officers scrambled to call for medical assistance. Letelier was critically wounded. Both of his legs had been severed, and shrapnel had pierced his torso. Ronnie, too, was gravely injured by the blast and fought desperately to breathe. Miraculously, Mike survived the explosion without a scratch, but watched in horror as his wife and friend clung to life. As paramedics rushed Letelier to the hospital, FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick arrived at the scene. "What we walked into was total devastation," he recalled. There was a mangled vehicle, a woman lying on the pavement, and the cries of a young man echoing through the noise. He kept shouting, "DINA did this." I didn't even know what that meant yet. In the U.S., any attack on foreign diplomats falls under federal jurisdiction, and this case was no exception. The FBI sealed off the area and began gathering every possible piece of evidence. Over 150 agents and forensic specialists descended on the scene, analyzing everything they could. Tragically, it wasn't long before the hospital confirmed what many feared. Both Orlando Letelier and Ronnie Moffett had succumbed to their injuries. The FBI officially launched a homicide investigation. Given the sensitive political nature of the attack, the federal court system designated the case as one requiring urgent and meticulous attention. It was so serious that a special federal prosecutor was brought in from day one, something that hadn't happened since the Watergate scandal. That prosecutor, Gene Proper, was determined to get answers. "The murder was savage," he said, "and I needed the world to know that you can't just get away with this on the streets of Washington." I didn't care if Letelier was a socialist, a communist, or anything else. He and that young woman didn't deserve to die. By the second day of the investigation, the FBI was already considering one primary motive: political assassination ordered by a foreign government. They learned from a U.S. State Department that the Chilean military regime held Letelier personally responsible for causing international financial losses due to his advocacy. In Buenos Aires, FBI Special Agent Bob Scherer worked behind the scenes to avoid tipping off the Chilean authorities. Quietly, he reached out to his intelligence contacts in Argentina, trying to uncover whether Chile's secret police were involved. One informant mentioned a clandestine program known as Operation Condor, a coalition of right-wing South American governments united in their efforts to eliminate leftist dissidents by any means necessary. Could Letelier's murder have been the first act under this deadly alliance? Back in Washington, the FBI turned to a Latin American specialist at the State Department. The expert confirmed that Chile was in desperate need of economic support from the United States. Interestingly, the Chilean Minister of the Economy had landed in Dallas on the very morning of the bombing, there to lobby the U.S. for financial aid. The expert found it hard to believe that Chile would jeopardize its loan prospects by ordering a hit on Letelier right before asking America for help. But suspicion remained. And just as the agent started connecting dots, another bombshell literally shook the investigation. Just weeks after the car bomb that killed Orlando Letelier and Ronnie Moffett, another horrific explosion grabbed headlines. A commercial airplane en route from Barbados to Cuba was blown out of the sky, killing all 73 passengers on board. In a shocking twist, a group of right-wing Cuban exiles proudly took credit for the attack. For the FBI, the timing was more than just suspicious. Investigators began asking the hard question: could these same extremists have played a role in the Letelier bombing too? After all, Letelier had been a vocal supporter of Fidel Castro, and that might have made him a target. While it felt like a stretch, it was the only lead the FBI had. Special Agent Carter Koenig turned to the FBI lab for help. He asked the team to analyze the bomb used in Letelier's assassination and compare it to those in previous attacks linked to Cuban exile groups. But the lab didn't have much to work with. Most of the evidence had been obliterated in the blast. Still, from the fragments they managed to recover, the bomb's design didn't match anything they had seen from Cuban militants before. "We didn't want to hear that," said Koenig. "The last thing you want in a case like this is a dead end." But no match meant no suspect. Despite this setback, investigators weren't ready to eliminate the Cuban connection just yet. These groups had a long history of violence. It was entirely possible the bomb had been built by someone new, someone the FBI hadn't encountered before. So the team kept an open mind. But as days turned into weeks, the investigation stalled. In a bid to reignite the case, the FBI launched an international tip line. They received thousands of calls, most of them from Latin America. A few tips even came from Europe. One particular lead came from a reverend in the New York area, who claimed to know about 3 Chilean intelligence agents who had flown out of the country right after the Letelier bombing. Agent W followed up immediately, questioning the reverend, but it quickly became clear that the priest hadn't witnessed anything firsthand. His information came from unnamed friends, and he wasn't willing to share their identities. "I told him he needed to convince those people to come forward," W later said. Meanwhile, Agent W headed straight to JFK Airport to verify the reverend's claims. According to the tip, the Chilean agents had left by plane shortly after the bombing, but no one at the airport could confirm the story. Just like that, the lead dried up. Then something unexpected happened. One morning, as Agent W's fiancée, a flight attendant, left for work, someone watched her from the shadows of an airport parking garage. She suddenly came face to face with a menacing stranger. The terrorists, it seemed, were no longer just on a run. They were retaliating. Shaken, she called W in tears. "I was shocked and furious," he admitted later. "Whoever this guy was, he didn't even come to me. He went after my fiancée. That was a line crossed." Clearly, the FBI had rattled someone. W realized they might have asked the right questions. Hit a nerve. So now he had to figure out who exactly had taken notice. Determined to track down the threat, Agent W's fiancée helped sketch a composite image of the man who had confronted her. FBI agents circulated the drawing throughout New York's Chilean immigrant community, hoping someone would recognize the face. But no one did. Then, nearly a month after the original bombing, came another break in the case. The U.S. State Department sent the FBI photos of 2 suspicious Chilean agents. Their identities were unknown, but there was something strange. Just a month before Letelier's death, both men had applied for U.S. visas at the embassy in Paraguay using fake passports. One of the men didn't even look Chilean, but both openly admitted they were government agents claiming they needed visas to meet with the CIA in Washington. The ambassador at the embassy grew suspicious. Quietly, he photographed their documents and later handed the evidence over. When the CIA denied any knowledge of the men, the visas were denied. Now, those photos were in the FBI's hands. Agent Carter Cornick recalled, "We had these pictures, but no names, no idea who they were. If we could identify them, maybe we'd finally have a lead that stuck." Then came another clue, and it pointed, once again, straight to Cuba. A Venezuelan newspaper published an article alleging that right-wing Cuban exiles living in the United States were the primary suspects in Letelier's killing. The article named two individuals, Enrique and Sanchez Ayala, brothers based in New Jersey. The FBI knew them. They were founders of an ultranationalist anti-Castro group suspected in several recent bombings, including an attack on a Soviet ship docked in New York and another on a Cuban cultural event. Now, the question was unavoidable. Were the Ayala brothers behind Letelier's assassination too? To find out, an agent headed to a Cuban-dominated neighborhood in New Jersey, where the brothers were rumored to spend time, and what he discovered next only deepened the mystery. When agents questioned Enrique Ayala about where he'd been on the day Letelier was murdered, his answer was unexpected and suspicious. "That's my ace up my sleeve," he said with a sly grin. That strange remark didn't sit well with investigators. Deputy U.S. Attorney Gene Proper found it deeply unsettling. "You hear something like that," he explained, "and you can't help but wonder, what's this guy hiding?" Proper ordered Ayala to appear before a grand jury. The FBI delivered a subpoena to his home, but his wife told him Enrique was gone. He had vanished without a trace. The agents began questioning members of the Cuban exile community, hoping someone would give up his location. Pressure started to mount. Eventually, Ayala turned himself in. In a closed-door session in Proper's Washington office, Ayala flatly denied any involvement in Letelier's death. When asked again about his ace, he brushed it off as a bad joke. "I was just messing around," he said, but his answers didn't add up. During the formal hearing, Ayala refused to answer questions about a recent trip to Chile, invoking the Fifth Amendment, a clear indication that he wasn't willing to cooperate further. A few days later, the story took another bizarre turn. Special Agent W received a call at his home. On the other end of the line was a Cuban exile, someone believed to be a bomb maker and fierce anti-Castro radical. "I'm coming over," the voice said. "We need to talk." W was stunned. How did this guy even get my number? He wondered. And more importantly, how did he know where I lived? He rushed to his neighbor, Danny, a New York City cop. "Grab your gun and come with me," W told him. "Something's about to go down." The two men hid near W's home. Just a few minutes later, a Cuban nationalist appeared at W's front door. The agent immediately recognized him. "We had a pretty heated argument," W recalled. "He claimed that he and his group had nothing to do with threatening my fiancée. Then he told me to back off. W wasn't having it. I told him, 'You show up at my door again, and you're leaving in a body bag.'" The confrontation made it clear. The FBI was getting close, maybe too close. As W ramped up pressure on the Cuban exile circles, tensions boiled. People clammed up. Some cursed him out. "Get lost," one man snapped. But W refused to back down. He chased down every lead, no matter how small. Finally, 5 weeks after Letelier's murder, a breakthrough. An ex-Cuban bomb maker agreed to talk. This was either a golden opportunity or a trap. The source claimed to have knowledge about a blond Chilean man, someone with a military bearing, who had met repeatedly with Enrique Ayala. The bomb maker believed that Ayala and his fellow nationalists were seeking support from Chile's right-wing government. That tip lit a fire under the investigation. Agent W spoke to other informants who confirmed they had seen a tall, slim Chilean, someone the Cubans referred to as the Big Thin One. That was the first clear link between the Chilean intelligence agent and the Cuban nationalist movement. At last, it seemed, the pieces were falling into place. The FBI's attention shifted to Santiago, Chile. Special Agent Bob Scherer traveled south. To follow up, he met with an Interpol representative who confirmed something important. Enrique Ayala had traveled to Chile 2 years earlier and had likely met with senior officials, possibly even the country's secret police. With that new intel, Jean Proper ordered Ayala and 2 of his associates back before the grand jury. Tensions were rising. Then, something chilling happened. Proper received a death threat on his personal phone line, but instead of pulling back, he and Agent Koenig pushed harder. They subpoenaed Ayala once again. This time, he and his friends invoked the Fifth, refusing to answer a single question. "We knew we were close," Proper said later. "And the people involved? They were getting nervous. That meant we were on the right path." The case was teetering on the edge. The FBI had connected more dots than ever, but still couldn't make a decisive move. "We were so close," said Special Agent Carter, "but we had nothing concrete to strike with." Then, a glimmer of hope emerged. In New York, the Secret Service contacted the FBI after arresting a document forger. The man wanted to make a deal. He claimed he had inside knowledge of a planned attack, a threat against none other than U.S. Attorney Eugene Proper. According to him, the plot was being orchestrated by the Ayala brothers themselves. After months of investigative dead ends, this might finally be the breakthrough they had been chasing. The forger said he'd been creating fake IDs and passports for a group of anti-communist Cuban exiles, the very same group suspected of planning the bomb that killed Letelier. To the FBI, it sounded like they were preparing to vanish, maybe even escape the country. When the forger added that these nationalists had threatened to assassinate Jean Proper and the U.S. Justice Minister if Enrique Ayala went to prison, alarms went off. Agent W offered the forger a deal: cooperate fully, and he put in a good word with the intelligence community. Nervous but willing, the forger agreed. His first task? Deliver a fake ID to Sanchez Ayala, Enrique's brother. The FBI set up a sting. From a hidden location, Agent W watched as the forger walked into meeting with a rolled-up magazine. The fake documents were tucked inside. After the drop, Ayala left the restaurant with that exact same magazine. For the FBI, it was all the proof they needed. The forger was legit. The next move was to bring Enrique Ayala back to court. But when the day came, he was gone, now officially on the run. That only strengthened the FBI's belief that the Ayala brothers were deeply involved in the assassination plot. 2.5 weeks later, the forger met with Sanchez Ayala again. This time, Sanchez tore a U.S. dollar bill in half and gave one piece to the forger. "Soon, a tall, blond Chilean will come to see you," he said. "He'll be carrying the other half." It felt like a spy movie. And once again, the name, the big blonde one, surfaced. The same ghostly figure agents had heard about for weeks. Still, the FBI had their doubts. Would this mysterious Chilean agent really come all the way back to the U.S.? Chile's intelligence service could easily create fake IDs themselves. Why take the risk? Determined to follow any lead, the FBI tracked Sanchez Ayala to Miami, hoping he'd lead them straight to his brother. But just as quickly as he appeared, Sanchez vanished again. Then, out of nowhere, the story took a turn no one saw coming. The big blonde man showed up. He approached the forger in person. Their first chat was small talk, just some friendly banter about motorcycles. But before leaving, the man said something crucial. A friend of Enrique Ayala will be reaching out soon. He'll need more documents. When Agent W heard the forger had met the blonde Chilean, he jumped into action. He arranged a meeting and showed the forger several photos. One, in particular, stood out, a Chilean agent who had once tried to enter the U.S. using a fake name, Juan Williams. "That's him," the forger said without hesitation. No doubt about it. Finally, they had a name, or at least an alias. The FBI sent a team to Santiago, Chile, to dig into this Juan Williams. But there was a problem. No such person existed in any official records. Not with the Chilean military. Not with the government. Juan Williams was a ghost. Nearly a year had passed since Letelier and Ronnie Moffat were murdered in D.C. And now, the FBI had a working theory. The Ayala brothers, part of a Cuban exile group, had teamed up with Chilean intelligence to carry out the attack. But proving it, that was a challenge. Jean Proper knew they needed more. He tried to pull official records from Chile, but hit one wall after another. So the FBI decided to go public. They reached out to the Chilean government directly, demanding information on an agent who had met with bomb experts in the U.S. under the name Juan Williams. It was a bold move. If Chile had really sent an agent to orchestrate an assassination on U.S. soil, it would be a massive scandal. And for the first time, it looked like Chile might be feeling the pressure. For a while, the FBI heard nothing. Silence stretched on for nearly a month after their request for help from Chile. So Deputy U.S. Attorney Gene Proper decided to shake things up. He submitted a strategic letter to the court, but he did something unusual. Rather than sealing away with the other files, he placed the letter on top, loose and visible. It named the fake identities of the Chilean agents and accused them of playing a direct role in Letelier's assassination. It was a bold gamble. People laughed at me at the State Department, Proper said, but I figured if it went public, the Chileans might panic, and maybe, just maybe, they'd slip. Sure enough, the letter and the photos of the suspects were leaked to the press. The next day, newspapers around the world ran front-page stories accusing Chile's secret police, DINA, of collaborating with Cuban extremists to kill Orlando Letelier. The news hit Chile like an earthquake. Suddenly, their government was being portrayed as a partner in cross-border terrorism. In a panic, Chilean officials called the U.S., requesting urgent meetings with both the Secretary of State and the Justice Department. That press storm triggered a flood of new intel. One magazine went further than anyone expected. They revealed the true identity of Juan Williams, the mysterious blonde agent tied to the case. As it turned out, he wasn't even Chilean. He was American. The FBI was stunned. Could it really be that the Chilean assassin was born in the United States? They began checking the name. It didn't take long. According to official records, there was a man named Michael Townley, a U.S. citizen born in Iowa, who had grown up in Chile, and he matched the description of the blonde ghost exactly. The agents headed to Fort Lauderdale to chase another lead. There, they found an electronics shop known for selling surveillance gear, spy tools like hidden microphones and bugging devices. The owner instantly recognized the man in the photo. "That's Kenneth Annard," he said. "He came in, bought gear, same day Letelier was killed." More than that, the store had paperwork from the Chilean government authorizing both Kenneth Annard and Michael Townley to make those purchases on behalf of their intelligence service. The FBI's hunch was right. Kenneth Annard was just an alias. He and Michael Townley were the same person. Now, for the first time, they had a real suspect and physical evidence. Meanwhile, in New York, Agent Larry W. met again with the trusted informant. He'd been watching the Cuban exile community closely. Now that the FBI had exposed their Chilean connection, the mood among the exiles had changed. They were terrified, the informant said. They knew the FBI had unmasked Townley, and they knew it was time to vanish. Agent W. told the forger to arrange one last meeting, this time with one of the group's leaders. I told him to say, "I found out you're still working with the nationalists, and you've been subpoenaed by a grand jury," W. recalled. The trap worked. The forger met with the suspect and asked for advice on what to do. The man's response was chilling. "Plead the fifth. That's what we did." And just like that, a veiled confession. They had done it. "We did it," he said. "They know. We know. Let them try to prove it." That's exactly what the FBI was going to do. The informant's testimony was now a verbal admission from a Cuban nationalist. But there was still one missing link, a direct connection between the Ayala brothers and Michael Townley. The FBI didn't have solid proof Townley was a bomber, but they were convinced he was a mysterious blonde agent who'd worked with the Cuban extremists, who had admitted, among themselves, that they carried out the Letelier hit. Even so, speculation wasn't enough. The law needed evidence. Proper and Agent Carter tried to piece together what they had, but an informant, no matter how credible, still wasn't proof. There was only one thing left to do. They had to go back to the source. They had to find Michael Townley. And to do that, they had no choice but to face Chile directly. With mounting pressure from the U.S., Gene Proper and the U.S. government didn't let up. Week after week, they pushed the Chilean authorities, demanding cooperation. Eventually, Proper took things to the International Court Justice, urging a formal meeting with Chilean officials. I brought the documents to the court president in Washington. Proper recalled. He asked me, "How's the investigation going?" I told him, "It's a tough one." He nodded and said, "God makes people who do these things make mistakes. Your job is to find them." Proper knew that Townley was a key, and that meant getting him out of Chile. But the government resisted. Chilean officials argued that cooperating would undermine their sovereignty. "We can't just hand over intelligence agents," they insisted. The U.S. pushed back. "Townley isn't just a spy. He's an American citizen who committed a crime on U.S. soil. We have every right to bring him to justice." Behind closed doors, a secret deal was made. Chile would hand over Townley only if the U.S. promised not to use his testimony to incriminate the Chilean government directly. The Americans agreed. The next day, Chilean police picked up Michael Townley. He believed he was being relocated for his protection, maybe even sent on a quiet, extended vacation. But at the airport, FBI agents were waiting. As Townley stepped onto the tarmac, expecting to board a plane to safety, he was instead handed over to U.S. authorities. He was stunned. Agent Carter remembered. He looked shocked, betrayed. He had no idea Chile had cut him loose. Townley said nothing on the flight back. He demanded a lawyer. He was taken to a secure military base in Quantico, Virginia, where the only official charge against him, at least at the moment, was using a false passport. Behind the scenes, Gene Proper prepared for a larger legal battle. The evidence was thin. Aside from the fake passport and his suspected ties, there was no ironclad proof of Townley's direct involvement in the bombing. But then, fortune turned again. In Miami, a sharp-eyed officer spotted and arrested Enrique Ayala, leader of the Cuban exile group. His capture gave the FBI new leverage. Proper and Agent Carter confronted Townley's lawyer. "Time's up," they said. "We just arrested the Cubans. First one to talk gets a deal." The truth? They didn't expect the Cubans to flip, but they wanted Townley to think they might. And it worked. After hours of tense negotiation, Townley agreed to cooperate, in exchange for a reduced sentence of 10 years. What he revealed was chilling. Townley admitted that he was a high-level agent for Chile's secret police, DINA. He said he followed orders, carrying out assassinations as military operations sanctioned by the regime. The Pinochet government viewed Letelier as a threat, a man who traveled the world exposing their abuses. His speeches in the U.S. Congress and meetings with senators had angered the Chilean leadership. Townley explained that he built the bomb himself late one night in a motel. Then he attached it to Letelier's car. After setting the plan in motion, he flew to Florida, leaving the Cuban nationalist to detonate the bomb remotely. He insisted he didn't know which of them pushed the button, only that it wasn't him. The Cubans, in return for supporting Chile's anti-communist agenda, had hoped for asylum or backing. Their far-right ideologies aligned closely, and both sides saw the assassination as a common mission. To test Townley's confession, the FBI recreated the bomb using the exact car model and setup. They filmed the entire process and detonated the device, right down to the bomb's placement under the seat. The result? The blast pattern was identical to the one at the real crime scene. Even Townley was rattled. "I want to go," he whispered afterward, visibly shaken. For once, the man who had orchestrated so many attacks saw the full weight of what he'd done. In the courtroom, photos of the exploded vehicles were submitted as key evidence. After a 7-week trial, the jury deliberated briefly and came back with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. Though some convictions were later overturned due to legal technicalities, the case set a precedent. Over the next 2 decades, multiple Cuban nationalists and Chilean officials were sentenced for their roles in the murder. Agent Carter called it a tragedy built on lies and fear. "I think Letelier was killed for 2 reasons, he said. 1, because his activism got Chile cut off from Dutch loans. And 2, because they thought he was building a government in exile. He wasn't. It was just paranoia." Years later, after Augusto Pinochet's fall, declassified documents confirmed the truth. The Chilean government did order the hit on Letelier. In the end, thanks to the persistence of the FBI and a few mistakes made by those who thought they'd never be caught, justice was served. And for any government considering targeted killings abroad, the message was clear. Think twice. The world is watching.